We have Dr. Bruce Alberts here. He is the Chancellor Leadership Chair in Biochemistry and Biophysics for Science and Education at the University of California. Dr. Ashok Dalwai is the Chief Executive Officer, National Rainfed Authority of India, Rainfed Authority of India. It's a Government of India institution. Professor Anura Kurpad is here. He is Head Division of Nutrition, St. John's Research Institute, Bangalore. And we have Professor Thomas Boller. He is from University of Basel, Switzerland. He was one of our collaborators in developing some very important programs. Mr. Naing Kyi Win. He is the Director General, Department of Agricultural Research, Ministry of Agriculture and Irrigation, the Republic of Union of Myanmar is also here. Dr. Ashish Chaturvedi is here. He is the Director, Climate Change, GIZ, India. Dr. Pradanya is from World Food Prize. And Professor Ambassador Kenneth Quinn is also here. He is the President, World Food Prize Foundation, USA.
So just to repeat what, in the first session, that going forward, the mandate of the foundation remains, very largely in line with the vision earlier, addressing the challenge of Zero Hunger Challenge or the challenge of hunger and food security, but in this context of climate change and biodiversity loss. And so we have assembled here speakers from different spheres, academic and otherwise, government, who can, deliberate on what we have discussed in the last 3 days and give some suggestions on way forward. That's what this session is about, on these challenges, because we are one small organization. The challenges are huge and global. What is it that we can work on? What is it that we can do best? So I want to start with Professor Bruce Alberts.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here to help celebrate this wonderful organization's 30th anniversary and MS himself, of course. Just a few words about my association in the past with MS. This is a picture taken 15 years ago. I have been here maybe 10 different times, visiting villages and projects, and I've learned a lot from my experiences and associations with MS Swaminathan. This is a letter I wrote him in 2005, and it makes the general point I want to make. And I wrote that through your wisdom and example, you have made us aware of the enormous good that can be provided to the world's poor through both science and the work of scientists. This was not something I had known about before I met MS in 1998, because I was a scientist in the United States, and my world of science was very narrow. Didn't reach out to society in the way MS has taught us all to do. Later I moved to be editor-in-chief of Science magazine, and we made use of what I had learned, including recruiting MS to write editorials. And I'm very proud of the last issue of Science magazine before I left as editor-in-chief after 5 years. We made a trip to India. This is a MS Swaminathan inspired trip. We wanted to see how science and engineering, the best of science and engineering in India, was being used to address the problems of India's poor peoples and the society at large. We spent a lot of time at IIT Madras here in Chennai and many other places around India, and we wrote this with News Team. We wrote this article, Science for All, illustrating what science and engineering can do when talent is applied to real problems of society. So for the last 20 years, first of all, I've never worked in agriculture. I don't even know one plant from another. The focus in my applying science to society has been in how we educate young people. So I would claim that we should try to make a science out of education. How can we use scientific approaches to greatly improve the way we teach children. And this was the focus of much of what I did as Academy President for 12 years in Washington, D.C. This was our first major report trying to harvest the best of science and technology to improve education. It's called How People Learn, Brain-Mind Experience in School. It basically took all the studies that have been done in academia about psychology of learning and what we know about the science of learning, and said, what does this mean for how we teach children? You know, it means, for one thing, we should not just talk at them. Children need to do things. We know they have to work together in what we call active learning. And so this has been a very influential report from the U.S. National Academy of Sciences. And then we asked an even broader question, and led to this report in this organization I'm going to mention briefly, called the Strategic Education Research Partnership, because as I will show you, it's very much like what is proposed for India in agriculture. What we heard yesterday from the director of the Department of Biotechnology. So this report asks, why has research supported innovation and continuous improvement in medicine, agriculture, and transportation, but not in education? And what can we do about it? How can we use research, the best scientific research in education, to advance how children learn? And here was the answer for this. We had a very distinguished, broad committee. They said that education is missing the equivalent of the teaching hospital in medicine. That is what they called field sites. Places where researchers, teachers, and designers work together in practice settings to observe, explain, document, replicate, and evaluate practice as a source of new knowledge. And if you're talking about education, but think about agriculture. Agricultural practice, what farmers are doing as a source of new knowledge. Define problems and test solutions in the context of the real world, in real schools. In your case, it would be in real farmers' field. And thirdly, create new curriculum tools to improve how students learn. And of course, that has a direct analogy to agriculture as well. And I don't have any time to go through the history of this organization. Now 15 years old, more than 15 years old, and it's produced many very useful products. So this idea of combining with teachers, real people in real schools, and the best academic researchers to try to work together to produce a better education system, this organization, SERP, has proved that this kind of mechanism is very useful for education. And then yesterday, we heard, I think many people were surprised by this, there will be new farmer-centered research centers competitively awarded. This is the talk from Dr. Renu Swarup. And the equivalent, I couldn't help but think about the exact equivalents. The Indian farmers are the U.S. teachers. U.S. teachers don't have a voice. And, you know, they know a lot, they're working with children, but nobody ever listens to them. So SERP tried to change that, it has been changing that. Sustainable farmer livelihoods is equal to the outcome we want, which is good student learning. And of course, the Indian scientists, engineers that will be involved in your new centers are the same equivalent to the U.S. university faculty. In the case of U.S. university faculty, they don't have a tradition of working in the real world of education. They generally work in much more theoretical, remote ways, not getting engaged deeply with the real problems of our schools. So all these things are very equivalent to what you're trying to do. So these efforts not only harvest and respect farmer knowledge and ideas, but very importantly, focus the work of outstanding scientists and engineers on the real major problems that farmers identify. That's the whole thing about the SERP organization. It does what the school districts say, here's my problem, help us deal with this problem, and the farmers will obviously do the same thing. Okay, I want to very quickly, I have very little time, just can't resist talking about the new view of education. It's very important for India, it's very important for the world. I am on the jury to help select the winner of this major education prize from Hong Kong called the Yidan Education Prize, $4 million to the winners, 2 winners every year. And I've learned a lot from that, because the first winner was Vicky Colbert, pictured here. She's been working for 40 years in Colombia, South America, on making rural schools work for that nation. And she had all these constraints that we all have. Teachers who weren't well trained, overloaded teachers that had to teach many different grades, couldn't know enough to teach well. And she developed, by a series of experiments, a system where much of the education of the children occurs when they're working in groups in their community to learn things and investigate. It's very relevant to sustainable development and to all the problems we've been discussing here. Start with the young people. Don't try to only tell them about this when they're adults. And so here's an example. Her tool that she developed were these sort of little learning guides. She's got hundreds of these learning guides where this group of students will take a learning guide and go out in the community and do work together and bring back the work to the teacher. And so many different groups of students can be working at the same time. The teacher doesn't have to do everything. It's student-centered rather than teacher-centered. Here's an example she sent me in English, most of them in Spanish, but she had a few in. Here's one where young kids go out and investigate their water supply. And they have to go ask my family to help me make signs to remind everybody of rules to keep our water clean. And here are some examples. And then I come back and show my work to my teacher, who records on my progress chart what I have completed successfully with my family, with my community. So these kids are actually doing real work. I mean, important things. It's very relevant to health, many different topics that we care about. And I see this as a really important idea. The same idea has now been adopted by the Association of 140 Science Academies around the world. This is called the IAP, or Inter-Academy Panel. Its secretariat is centered in Trieste, Italy, and it's been around for about 20 years. But this is now one of their major projects, and that is to create free curricula designed to empower youth, people ages 8 to 17, to use science for social goods. It's very much like that little experiment that what Vicky Colbert did in Colombia, but this is more ambitious, trying to create things that could be used around the world, translated in many languages. And shown here are the first 2 units that have been completed. The first one done was called Mosquito, and the second one is on nutrition, food. It's exactly related to this topic of this meeting. And it's designed to bring the kind of ideas that we're talking about directly into the world of children so that they become agents for change in their communities, in their future lives. And here's an example of what students do in groups in the mosquito unit. It's all, again, going out in the community and doing things together, map their community, determine where mosquitoes live in their community, investigate how to control the mosquito population near their school, museum, or neighborhood. And this has been actually used in Panama and Malawi, where they field tested the units. And so all this stuff is going to be free on the web. The mosquito unit is already up. There's a lot of material, and it's going to rely on many of us to make it happen in our own countries. It needs volunteers. It needs the scientific community to get involved. Here are the idea of the future units. The units themselves are being developed in a process led by the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, which has a major expertise in this kind of thing. And after the nutrition and mosquito units, they have planned water, agriculture, pollution, and so on. And these are structured around the UN sustainability goals. So that makes them even more usable in the sense that everybody's thinking about how we deal with this. I see this as a way of spreading science around the world, a new way of spreading science around the world, because just talking to people doesn't do it. I've been doing that for a long time. We need new tools, and I'm quite excited about this. All right, so this is I'm at the end now. My vision for the future is an education system that provides credit in school for focused student work in the community while encouraging students to work cooperatively together, as they do in the nation of Colombia, the work that Vicky Colbert started some 30 or 40 years ago. Secondly, harnesses the talents of volunteers who supplement the teachers, people who work with the kids in the community. And finally, produces adults who can help to build a more sustainable world. That's the whole point of this Academy project. So I am actually on time. In summary, to create a peaceful, sustainable world, the challenges ahead for scientists are enormous, but inspired by MS, his great accomplishments, his vision, and his energy, we shall find a way. And this is a happy birthday sign to my great friend, MS. Thank you.
With the permission of Chair, we deliberated a lot of issues, and my colleague Dr. Bhavani will make a 10-minute presentation on the major points what we deliberated and the wrap up. All the session chairs have given their recommendations that she will make a presentation.
Morning, everybody. We had 3 technical sessions during the course of these three days, and we've tried to put together the key recommendations and the major points emerging from these sessions under the heads of research, outreach, and advocacy, and I'll quickly run through them for the benefit of the entire audience as well as those who have just come in today. So each session was, there were distinguished experts from the respective fields. There was a chair, co-chair. There was presentation of the work done by MSSRF in the context, in the current global context. The relevance of the work was situated, and we had a keynote address followed by 6 to 7 discussants in each session, or panelists. The first was on climate change and coastal zone management on 7th afternoon. And these were the major points in terms of the need for economic evaluation of different ecosystems to understand the value of ecological services provided by each, the need for a coastal biodiversity information system, sustainable models to understand sea level rise and their impact on coastal ecosystems at the decentralized level so that location-specific impacts can be understood and appropriate plans developed. Need for systematic studies on the impact of rise in ocean temperatures on coral reef-associated fisheries at different depths and on tourism. 3D modeling and vulnerability maps of the coast to help reach vulnerable areas faster. Continuous mapping of the shoreline to understand changes in erosion along the seacoast. Need for prediction models for pelagic fisheries for the benefit of fishing communities. Coastal climate services, the need for addressing this to develop coastal climate services. Integrate coastal knowledge with social and human systems and modeling, integrating the larger environment system and the human system. And a policy paper on coastal resource use, governance, livelihoods, research and management, as well as sustainable use of resources for societal benefit. Under outreach, the need to revive traditional farming of rice and shrimp where feasible for better income to coastal communities, an area that MSSRF has worked in. ICT-based tools to help vulnerable fishers, and there are 2 which are being tested now and should be able to provide connectivity from the deep sea to the mainland. Design adaptive and mitigation strategies for sustainable development, fill gaps where they exist in terms of strengthening livelihoods and capacity of the coastal communities for adaptation. Action plans with achievable targets and multi-stakeholder approach. The last, of course, is something which came across in all these sessions, and here specifically to address the impact of climate change vulnerability along the coast. Advocacy, the need for conservation of all coastal ecosystems is crucial in the context of ecological and livelihood security of people living along the coast. for policies to deal with impacts on coastal areas due to climate change, looking at the gap that there is no CG Institute or any international institute working on this area in a focused manner. The recommendation came about for an international center for excellence for sustainable development and management of coastal ecosystems to be led by MSSRF for the benefit of vulnerable coastal zones and communities across the globe. The second session, which was yesterday morning, was on science and technology to secure and sustain smallholder farmers' livelihoods and nutrition and health security. And the key points here under research were to address the development of short duration crop varieties which can withstand abiotic stresses, conservation agriculture to enhance sustainable use of natural resources, and the need for appropriate institutional mechanism to harness the scale of technologies to benefit smallholder farmers. Seasonal climate forecasting for effective risk management, and modeling the research focus on developing downscaled models, with addressing the space and time dimensions to suit the context of smallholder farmers. Strategies for retention of necessary soil moisture using renewable materials which can enrich soil health. So to reduce the level of evapotranspiration. So the DG ICRISAT shared the example of China using plastic covers, but we need to again look at alternatives to plastic to facilitate this mechanism. Contextualize factors that shape women's role in agriculture and in different settings, and they should be component for qualitative methodologies in large-scale studies where smaller sample size can lead to better insights into issues of gender and social relations. Studies on the right balance to ensure both ecological and economic sustainability along with social sustainability of systems and models which are recommended and promoted. Develop eco-enterprise models for promotion at scale, and the need for an interdisciplinary approach for appropriate technologies which are scale neutral and to suit smallholder farmers specifically. Research on sustaining collective action through appropriate institutional structures and processes among smallholders. And the need for location-specific farming system for nutrition models for different agroecological zones. It was emphasized that the integrated farming system model, which is promoted by the Indian Council for Agriculture Research, the nutrition dimension has to be more prominent, given a more prominent place, and we need to emphasize on this as farming system for nutrition approach. The outreach, the need for social mobilization and use of learner-centric capacity building methods and processes in livelihood-related programs. Harnessing ICT tools like use of mobile apps for decision-making tools, and also to disseminate locale-specific and demand-driven information related to technologies and associated services. The Fisher Friend mobile application of MSSRF is one such example. Watershed approaches, sustaining the initiatives at the local level in partnership with local communities and institutions. The need for promoting crop diversity and mixed farming for production diversity to lead to dietary diversity, and as well as increase in incomes. Nutrition gardens of fruits and vegetables, so bringing in the nutrition focus in a direct manner, and ensuring that all groups of vegetables and fruits are there in the garden. Nutrition awareness strategies across the board for dietary diversity, to understand the nutrient content in the food we eat, and also the need to emphasize on the aspects of water, sanitation, and hygiene. Decentralized processing and value addition to increase incomes at the grassroots level, the community level. And the need to understand that, again, that technology adoption is a complex process which needs appropriate strategies and in the contextualized for small farmers, and also the necessary hand-holding support. And all programs need to consider system stability while both planning and implementing, so they can't be in pockets. There's need for an integrated approach in terms of moving from production to consumption and marketing, and the chain of adoption of technologies along this line. Under advocacy, the need for a farming system for nutrition approach for household food and nutrition security of smallholder farmers, greater policy support for nutrient-dense crops, nutrition awareness strategies to focus on improving dietary diversity, technologies to strengthen on-farm and non-farm livelihoods of smallholder farmers, along with access to other productive resources and services like market and credit, of decentralized processing units to promote an inclusive value chain, and necessary institutional support in terms of credit, infrastructure support for technology upgradation of small businesses. The last session yesterday afternoon was on mainstreaming biodiversity for climate resilience and sustainable development, research, innovation, and value chain development in addressing the neglected and underutilized crop species, for nutrition security, also addressing the issues of climate resilience. Research on nutrient value of different indigenous plants and foods. So there's so many wild foods growing, which have been part of the diets of indigenous communities, to have greater knowledge about these. And research and action on neglected and underutilized species in farming systems, to integrate them into the farming system. The need for networking and partnerships for effective utilization of biodiversity in the face of climate change, capacity building of women farmers on conservation-linked value chains and appropriate technology development, promoting conservation and consumption of wild foods, indigenous foods, awareness with respect to biodiversity conservation and its sustainable utilization, as well as knowledge about the international conventions and the legislations. Advocacy in terms of promoting nutrient-dense plant varieties, neglected and underutilized crops, and crop wild varieties, integrating them in the nutrition-sensitive agriculture and climate adaptation strategies. Conservation of functional biodiversity, especially the microbial biodiversity in farms, to reduce the use of harmful agrochemicals. Strategies to conserve wild relatives of cultivated plants, both with in situ and through in situ and ex situ measures. Recognizing custodian farmers in the context of climate change and ensuring food and nutritional security. Support for community-based conservation initiatives and nutrition-sensitive agriculture and sustainable development needs to be, needs the necessary state support and convergence with ongoing programs where the nutrition dimension needs to be mainstreamed to be taken up at scale. So that in brief was a summary of what we deliberated on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhavani. May I request Dr. Ashok Dalwai to make his points?
Friends, good morning. At the outset, let me join all of you in wishing our legendary scientist and inspirer, Dr. Swaminathan. And sir, we continue to be inspired by you. And I think we wish you a long life, healthy life, in our own interest, in the interest of science for the farmers of this country and the world. I have just 5 minutes, so let me quickly share my thoughts. Now, what I would like to say is that the science, which is the basis of any progress, including the agriculture, we need a science today which is not of just discovery but one of delivery. When we talk of science of just discovery, then many a time it is scientist-centric, the person's egocentric, publication of research papers possibly. But what we need today, given the urgency of the matter, a science of delivery. And what India or countries like India require is the essence of meeting nutritional requirement and the incomes of the stakeholders. Indian agriculture in particular has not really recognized that farmers are the stakeholders, the primary actors. And in result, what we see today over the last decades, while Indian agriculture has grown, India has become food secure, the farmers have become income insecure. When you talk about sustainability, to my mind, there are two kinds of sustainabilities. One is ecologically, it has to be sustainable, and parallelly, it has to be economically sustainable. The farmers cannot be supported by government all the time through subsidies and concessions. No government has that ability or capacity. There are competing demands all the time. So market forces have to sustain through better incentive for the farmer producers. And if that is to happen, we need a new paradigm in the policy framework, which will ensure that the interests of the consumers and the interests of the farmer producers are balanced in an equilibrium manner. I would therefore advocate that we need to look at agriculture more wholesomely. Given the necessity of the yesteryears, where greater focus was there on the crop segments, we now have a time and a need to look at agriculture as an entire value system. That agriculture consists of crop segment, including the agronomic crops and the horticultural crops, and also the animal husbandry, livestock, dairy, fisheries, aquaculture. The science has to start focusing in terms of research and development on all these aspects, because there are supplementary and complementary relations. When Indian farmer traditionally had been practicing integrated farming system, he was trying to harvest the complementary relations that exist between one activity and the other. But thanks to the science and the policies of our government, we have shifted to monocropping or mono activities. If we want to bring back that integrated farming system, the science has to give us a new answer. But science alone cannot give the answer. The policy is also equally important, because we are trying to also, as I said, look at the income perspective. When you have decentralized production through integrated farming, superimposed on the already decentralized and fragmented lands, the challenges of aggregation become galore. And unless we are able to aggregate this decentralized produce and integrate them with the market forces, we will not be able to capture the value for the farmers. So when we are looking at sustainable ecological solutions, simultaneously we also need to look at sustainable policy solutions that help the farmers to ultimately become part of the value system. So this is a new challenge, that how both the production scientists and the post-production scientists sit together and suggest a policy framework that will help the farmers to find incentive in the market and also be in alignment with the agroecology. Certainly, agroecological based production system is extremely important given the climate change and the extractive practices that we have had in the last 50 years. Today, soil and water, which are the two basic inputs for any production system, whether it is cropping system or the animal husbandry system, they both are under stress. So we will have to find ways of re-nurturing these two important factors, soil and water. As we know in India particularly and the world over, more than 80% of the water is being used in agriculture. So how do we make water use efficient such that we're able to first increase the output per unit of water and simultaneously release water for other purposes? Because whenever we draw a policy for water use, the first demand or the first charge is on drinking water. So now the drinking water itself has become a problem. In fact, it's just not the rural scarcity of water, even the urban scarcity of water has become a concern. Hence, I think we need a new science which will teach us how to nurture the water, save the water, use it more efficiently. So new science that is required is really to say how we are able to enhance the per unit water output. I think this is all composite. We cannot look at each of these things in an isolated manner. Everything is an organically linked system. Only when the science, when I say science of delivery, I was only trying to mean that science has to look at wholesomely and in not an isolated manner. So we need more collaborative research. We need more open-minded research, such that ultimately we recognize what is the delivery that we want. We want incomes for the farmers. We want sustainable approach so that the ecology is able to sustain itself over a long period of time. And then we need to work backwards and set our hypotheses and objectives. I think only then the scientist becomes an integral part of the society and not an isolated manner. So now the government of India's policy are trying to be retailored to meet this particular requirement. Not that it is so easy, because it is an elephant. If it has to take a turn, it is going to take a time. But I think really the system does not brook any delay given the climate change that we're already seeing. We are now seeing, for example, the rains this year, the onset was delayed by 1 month, and today we're seeing heavy downpour. What we received in 3 months are being just received in 1 month. So this is the situation. I'll stop here. Thank you, sir, for giving this opportunity. Thank you, ma'am, for giving this opportunity. All the best.
Thank you very much, sir, for your enlightening lecture. It's a complex situation, and you explained it. And may I request now Professor Anura Kurpad, Head Division of Nutrition, St. John's Research Institute, to share his thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Swaminathan, and congratulations on 30 years of this foundation, and thank you, Madhura, for inviting me. I come from the demand side of nutrition, and when I say demand side, I'm more involved in how much nutrition is required for a population. And whenever I hear the word agriculture and nutrition linkages, I'm struck by the need to demonstrate an effect. We want to see a good effect in all the population, but there's a need to show where the effect is, and you're probably going to find that effect best when you look at the growth of little children. Now, all children are important, but if you want to see an effect, you really want to look at it at a very young age. And here's a fun fact for you to ponder about, and that is that a child reaches half its adult height, approximately, at the end of 2 years. More important, a child settles into how it will grow at the end of 2 years. Before that time is a period of great uncertainty in growth. It is a period where growth begins to decline in India. It's remarkable state across state. If you look at the data, children are born reasonably close to normal, but then they begin to falter and falter and falter in the first 2 years. And by the end of 2 to 2.5 years, they are stable in terms of how much they continue to falter. They stay there. At the end of 3 years, there is a system that the government has, a support system with the ICDS, where they get admitted into Anganwadis. But here's the point, it's too late. At that point, if you're thinking of trying to make them grow again, to regain that height they lost, you are faced with a great deal of uncertainty, because you sometimes can just make children fat if you feed them too much. Where you really need to work is in this first period. That's where the household is important. You've heard of the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. It also takes a household to raise a child. And here's the important thing. I think in India, it also takes a women's self-help group to raise a child, because it is these self-help groups that provide food for households to feed their children. And I want to remark on the education point that was raised. The fact is that these self-help groups give that food, they procure them as grain, really, and they make a sort of mix out of it, put it into a packet, and give it into houses. You give a household a packet full of some powder and say, feed this, they'll find 100 ways to use it which are not about feeding. They'll actually do anything they want. You need to educate. And this is where I think the education part that was alluded to earlier is extremely important. And I'm not very much a great fan of us using information technology and gadgets to educate people. I think education is an intensely human activity, and it's a pleasurable human activity, and it should continue to be that if supported by information technology, but never replaced by information technology. The important thing about the agriculture nutrition linkage is this, that we are very low on the proteins that a child is fed. Proteins of quality are from dal, from pulses, from eggs, from milk, but these commodities are in short supply. And in general, the procurement principle in this country, whether cooperative or government, tends to suck all the nutrient or the good foods out of villages into holding centers in tier 2 cities or tier 1 cities. That's a tragedy, because eventually that food, to get it back into the villages, requires a great deal of money and transport. Where the food is produced is never where it is consumed. And I think the bio-village concept that you are promoting is a fantastic idea, because if it embraces local procurement from those self-help groups, which can store these grains or perhaps process perishable foods and then supply it locally, that hopefully will be a very good start to the growth of these young children. And if the children are growing well, trust me, the rest do very well. It's like the Project Tiger. If the tiger is doing well, the rest of the ecosystem is doing well, and that's the principle. And I think really focusing on the growth, and here I say it again, focus on the growth of less than 3-year-old children and work towards the bio-village concept. It converges very well with this idea that it should happen. I think diversity of food is an important thing. It's been alluded to, so I won't go into that. I do also want to speak out about the whole principle of improving nutrition through fortification. I think it is something that is being pursued, but it is so much you can do. You can't make a relatively bad food into a good food by fortifying it with chemicals. I think the key is to produce it at the local, at the village level, and to consume it at that village level in all its diversity. The other thing is also that in fortification you work and you're a slave to the principle that you need to eat a certain amount of nutrients every day. Now that's the way we have defined nutrient requirements. That's an easy way to do it. Just say, how much do you need to eat per day? The fact is your body can cope with eating a little more once a week. It stores food. So it's a buffering system, and it's a complex system. We have reduced it to a simplicity of per day requirements. But if you apply your mind, again within this local procurement biovillage system, you will not be disappointed to think that, gosh, people can eat in different patterns. There can be spike eating of colored foods when they are in season. And then you store them as vitamin A, for example, in your body for use in leaner times. There has to be a new thinking in that sense. So fortification to me is not the great answer. I think it is, and I truly agree with Dr. Albert, who spoke about education. I do think that's the key. There was a paper that came out recently in the Journal of the American Medical Association of a trial in Karnataka where women were just educated about feeding their children the right foods for anemia. And it worked. Education works. Not cell phones. It's education. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. You are well in time, and thank you for, Foundation is also working in these areas, and we look forward for your, support and interaction. I call upon the next speaker, Professor Thomas Boller. I request him to.
Dear Professor Swaminathan, dear friends from the MSSRF, and dear colleagues from Switzerland and all over the world. It is a great honor to participate in the celebration and to bring you the greetings of Swiss institutions involved in research you do. As many of you know, I was involved in a fascinating and fruitful collaboration between India and Switzerland, namely as the coordinator and chairman of the program Biophy for biofertilization and bioirrigation in the context of the ISCB, the Indo-Swiss collaboration in biotechnology, a binationally funded program. Our Swiss team had previously already worked for a while in the context of the ISCB for 20 years with Indian colleagues in a scientific effort to examine the potential of biofertilization in wheat and rice production. This was a very interesting and culturally moving experience already. However, we often had the feeling in the course of this earlier phase of the ISCB that we worked in a sort of ivory tower disregarding the realities of smallholder farmers in India. Therefore, we greatly welcomed a change in strategy of the ISCB management. They decided to focus on two strategic aims, namely to work on actual problems of the rural population of smallholder farmers in South India, and second, to fund only such proposals that included a combination of biotechnological and socio-economic research. The targeted crops were no longer wheat and rice as everywhere on the world, but pigeon pea and finger millet two crops that are fundamental for South India. This meant to change directions and collaborations in India, and we had to build up an entirely new proposal in a competitive bidding for this program. In a memorable journey, the Swiss core team traveled to South India in 2013 and visited potential new partners, among them the MSSRF, as well as ICRISAT and GKVK. I remember the visit in MSSRF particularly well. It was an eye-opener for the Swiss team. We realized that this was an institution that had exactly the blend of biological and socio-economical science that we believe to have implemented in the Research Institute of Organic Agriculture in Frick, which was actually founded by my PhD advisor Philippe Mathil 40 years ago. And we were hosted perfectly here in MSSRF and joined forces to design a strong collaborative proposal based on the strengths of all partners. I would like to just briefly summarize this Biophysics project. It rested on three pillars. The first was to prepare mixed cultures, a mixed culture system between finger millet and pigeon pea. And the main trick there was to pre-grow this pigeon pea before the rainy season in pots that could be watered in so-called polybags. And these polybags were then planted in rows between finger millet at the start of the rainy season. So pigeon pea had a certain head start because of that. The second technique was biofertilization, which we had lots of experience before. And the nice thing was that we could now inoculate our biofertilization tools directly into these polybags with the pigeon pea. These were plant growth promoting bacteria and arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. And the third technique came from the MSSRF, and it was mentioned before already, how to produce biofertilizers needed for the project. In the earlier ISCB project, this ivory tower one, the biofertilizers were to be supplied by specialized profit-oriented companies in possession of a patent or a secret formula, a bit like Coca-Cola, which would produce their brand of biofertilizers at a large scale, with accompanying problems of distribution, price, shelf life, and quality control. The idea of MSSRF was to produce such biofertilizers at the low scale, at the small local scale, in so-called eco-enterprises. These eco-enterprises, administered often as a part-time job by a proactive female farmer, would produce and sell biofertilizers too, but just for one village or one smallholder community, so that the distribution path, the time for production to delivery, and the cost would be minimal. Indeed, in our project, we visited several such eco-enterprises and even inaugurated one. The idea is particularly promising, and in my view should absolutely be continued with respect to the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, because these fungi cannot be grown in fermenters or pure culture, but require an association with living plants. Their production is based on the association with a trap plant, such as maize, and can be grown locally easily. Now, in the course of our project, we had interesting results with abundantly discussed meticulous methods. It was a real big stress to set up all these field experiments, and there were 80 methods replicated 4 times, so 20 methods replicated 4 times, so we had 80 fields per field site, 80 plots per field site. One was in Bangalore, GKVK, and one was in the Collie Hills, managed by MSSRF. At the end, the results that came out were really promising. We had clear stimulation of the crops by the biofertilizers, a statistically relevant and clear effect. But surprisingly, the intercropping didn't produce very much profit with respect to yield. And we had to see that there was a sort of facilitation between the two plants brought together, so they helped each other, but then in cases they also competed with each other. So the competing effect somehow offset the facilitating effect. Okay, yes? Probably this is due, so competition and facilitation are two keywords in the scientific debate about intercropping, but these two words are also at the heart of scientific collaboration. Teams of various nations, Switzerland and India, various specializations, biotechnologists and socioeconomists may join their efforts to reach a common goal, and this requires facilitation. In my first experience with the IACB program 10 years ago, we had great highlights in demonstrating the positive effect of fertilization on the yield of wheat and rice, a facilitating effect. Unfortunately, however, it was also marred by competition. Instead of sharing resources to advance the common goals, stubbornness and bureaucratic obstacles prevented the exchange of essential resources of such strains as arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. Fortunately, however, in our new experience, our Swiss colleagues and myself have experienced the interaction with MSSRF in the new phase of IACB by no means as a competition, but as a great facilitation. And I wish you for the future, and we hope to continue to interact with you and to continue research on this facilitative effect. I wish you to continue in this spirit of facilitation and a combination of biotechnology and eco-sociology. So we hope to continue the collaboration, and on a personal note, I wish Professor Swaminathan and the MSSRF all the best in their exemplary effort to facilitate agriculture in India and all over the world by a combination of science and socio-economic for the benefit of humankind. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for those words, and we look forward for your collaborations. And may I call upon Mr. Naing Kyi Win to make his brief presentation.
Good morning. Distinguished guest, Professor, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I would like to mention thank you very much to Professor Swaminathan and also the Chairman Swaminathan, who invited me to attend this opportunity of the 30th anniversary of the MSSRF. This is my first time visit to India. So this is a very nice place and nice people. As we know, Myanmar located between two big countries as China and India. So thanks you very much to you all. Previous 2 days, I learned from the 30th MSSRF achievement. Today we know future idea. So I got a lot of knowledge, idea, and lesson learned from this occasion, such as the climate change, coastal India, UN Sustainable Development, smallholder farmers, livelihood, nutrition and health security, and this bio-village and farming system, genetic advancement, eco-technology for climate smart food production, innovation in food production system for nutrition and health, gender, livelihood and nutrition, and then biodiversity for sustainable agri-development and climate resilient and bio-village idea. So in here, I would like to share the brief information of Myanmar Sustainable Development Plan We have the Myanmar Sustainable Development Plan. This plan is in line with the MSSRF research plan. The Myanmar Sustainable Development Plan, MSDP, provides a long-term vision, a vision of a peaceful, prosperous, and democratic country, founded upon the objective of the giving coherence to policy and institutions necessary to achieve genuine, inclusive, and transformational economic growth. And MSDP has been developed in reinvigorate, reform, and promote bold action. MSDP has three main pillars, 5 goals, and 28 strategy, with designated project implementation program under each strategy. There are a total of 251 work process, and MSDP process will be implemented as a living document. And then I would like to present here the Zero Hunger challenges. National Zero Hunger challenges for Myanmar has been officially launched at the World Food Day on 60th October 2014, commemoration held in Ministry of Agriculture and Irrigation. And then Myanmar Agricultural Development Strategy and Investments Plan. This plan have the policy as follows. By 2030, Myanmar achieve inclusive, competitive food and nutrition secure, climate change resilient, and sustainable agricultural system, contributing to socio-economic well-being of the farmers and rural people and further development of the national economy. And then climate change and coastal condition in Myanmar. Myanmar is highly vulnerable to climate change. In the past 20 years, 1997 to 2016, it has been exposed to 43 extreme weather events, resulting in a total of 7,079 annual average inhabitants and annual average of 0.6% loss per in GDP. And also, we have the Myanmar climate change policy. The ability of our country to reach the targets under the Sustainable Development Plan, National Comprehensive Plan, and our peace efforts could be faced to obstacles by observed and future change in climate. And then we have the Youth and Sustainable Development Plan. In 1/3 of the population of the Myanmar youth, we are encouraged to youth to collaboration with the research plan. And also we have the biodiversity related activities in Myanmar. Achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals is at the heart of the work of the agricultural research in Myanmar. So we are in line with the Goal 2, Goal 13. And also the Biovillage program. We have as Gene Bank. This gene has a concept so many crops and many accession. And then, so this is the all Myanmar Sustainable Development Plan are in line with the MSSRF future plan. This means we Myanmar research will join hands together with MSSRF to implement future coordination, future climate change, biodiversity, and biotechnology for win-win situation. And last and not least, so I would like to give the successful example of the collaboration with Indo-Myanmar Cooperation Joint Project, Myanmar, and as the Rice Biopap project provided by the Indian government and MSSRF 2014-15 with our department compound. These projects have the three main objectives. Number one, to improve the value-added products in rice production and trading of Myanmar agricultural sector. Second, to produce the nutritious animal feeds in Myanmar livestock sector by utilization of the byproduct of rice. And last, to share the technology and knowledge to the formally, theoretically, and practically. I would like to share our rice biopap activities in French. So please join us.
ကနေပြီးတော့မှစက်ကူထုတ်လုပ်လို့ရတဲ့နည်းပညာကိုသိတဲ့အခါမှာကျွန်တော်တို့အနေနဲ့ဒီလိုပတ်ဝန်းကျင်ညှိနှိုင်းမှုလည်းမဖြစ်တော့ဘူးလေလွင့်ဆုံးရှုံးမှုတွေလည်းမဖြစ်တော့ဘဲနဲ့ကျွန်တော်တို့အနေနဲ့ဘ ഹു တုကအများကြီးရခဲ့ပါတယ်
ကျမဒီတောင်သူကိုယ်တိုင်လုပ်ပါတယ်စိတ်တိုင်းကြတာကတော့တပားမှထွက်တော့ကောက်ရိုးမှာမှုသဘောကျပါတယ်မှုဟာ9ရက်မှ15ရက်အထိငွေညံသုံးလွယ်သည့်အတွက်တောင်သဘောကျလို့ဖြစ်ပါတယ်
Okay, thank you very much for your kind attention. For in my conclusion, I would like to say again thanks to the Professor Dr. Swaminathan, also the chairman of the Swaminathan Foundation. Please join hand again future collaboration research plan. Also, we would like to propose the second phase of the rice pipeline. Also, the buses biopack. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for showing the highlights of the Rice Biopark in collaboration with us. There is a slight change in the program. May I request Professor Madhura Swaminathan to offer her comments?
I may have to slip out, so I want to just say a few words, and then after we have two more brief speakers, and then we have about half an hour, I think, to get anybody in the audience who has not had a chance to say something. Hariharan, you can chair that public forum, and then the concluding remarks. But I just wanted to say that I think summing up that we got today, there were a lot of ideas that have come out in the last 3 days, which we need to work on. But I want to just make 2 points, which for me I think are very important in going ahead, going forward, all of us together. The first is that we shouldn't romanticize the old, the indigenous. We need science and technology going forward. And I think that's because I think if everything was okay with the indigenous technology and science and research, we wouldn't be here today discussing the challenges we are. So this is not that we forget everything and drop everything that is old, but I think that there's no question in the balance, at least for me, where science comes first, and that's very important. The second, I think, also has come through and with our speakers today, and this is a plea to the audience here. We have to get young people involved in this. And so to each one of you who have come from different institutions and organizations, if you know young people who are willing to come here, because I remember 10 years ago we had a PhD student who came to us from Tamil Nadu Agricultural University, and we were in Calcutta then, and we took him to a village in Jharkhand near Giridih. And it was the first time he'd spent a night in the village. He's a very bright student. I'm not putting down TNAU, but I'm just saying that our courses, the way they're structured, you don't have that one day to go and stay in the village. So this is, I think, again, a very important going forward. I mean, many of us here are grey-haired today, so we are not going to be able to carry forward the 2030 agenda. I think we need young people, and I think that is the I would say plea from the part of the foundation that I would make, that whether they're social scientists or agronomists or nutritionists, please send us young people who can work on these challenges ahead. And that's what I wanted to say from my behalf, that it's been a big learning, and I hope we will continue this collaboration. Let me hand over to Hariharan, who will invite the next speaker.
Thank you very much, madam. May I now request Professor Dr. Ashish Chaturvedi to make his comments.
Many thanks for inviting me, and on behalf of GIZ and Indo-German Bilateral Cooperation, I wish MSSRF a happy 30th birthday, and also Professor Swaminathan sort of many more years to come. I have 5 minutes, I've been told, so I'd like to stick to a script, which I usually don't, but given the fact that we're really short of time, I would really like to stick to a script, and I'd like to focus my next few minutes on climate change adaptation, especially community and science-based sort of approaches. This choice of the topic is partly driven by the focus of what we do under bilateral cooperation, but also because we actually worked quite closely with MSSRF several years ago, and we continue to interact and work together on approaches of climate change adaptation and bringing in both community knowledge as well as science together. Now, I'm not sort of saying anything remarkably new here. Based on science as well as sort of lived experiences of communities, we now have fairly conclusive evidence that vulnerabilities due to climate change are increasing. This is experienced by communities dependent on natural resources for their livelihoods, as well as due to the unpredictability of weather, as well as increasing frequency of extreme weather events. Tamil Nadu is a very strong case in point. The data from several studies and those done by MSSRF, but also other institutions, clearly suggest that vulnerability of the coastal communities, as well as those living in the areas on the Eastern Ghats, is sort of increasing dramatically. The response to such enhanced vulnerabilities, of course, has been multi-pronged at the subnational level, so at the state level as well. States have drawn up their state action plans on climate change. Pilot projects and demonstration projects are being implemented, and there have been some allocation of funds focusing on climate change adaptation by the national government, something called the National Adaptation Fund on Climate Change as well. And Tamil Nadu's already got 2 projects under that scheme. I'd like to highlight one pilot or demonstration that we implemented jointly with MSSRF between 2011 and 2013. I just looked at the fact sheet that at that moment it mentioned 25 years of celebration of MSSRF, and we actually came out with that document. The project, of course, addressed the vulnerabilities of coastal communities through an integrated mangrove fishery farming initiative by sort of providing additional and sustainable sources of livelihoods for the fishing communities. It also contributed to developing of bunds and newly planted mangroves, which provided a protective shield to the coastline from storm surges, cyclones, and sea level rise. At the same time, we were looking at a system-based approach, so we looked at awareness creation and capacity development, and the project actually was really successful. It was actually scaled up using funds from the Adaptation Fund Board, and it was also replicated in the state of Andhra Pradesh. But we must sort of acknowledge that demonstration and pilot projects themselves are not going to be enough. The scale of the problem due to climate change and the urgency of the response required needs considerable means of implementation, both human as well as financial. And we've already heard several of our panelists talk about the capacities which are required, right? So I'd like to conclude by talking about 4 issues that come to my mind and could be an agenda for the future. It is definitely an agenda for the future for bilateral cooperation between India and Germany, could be also an agenda for like-minded institutions. So of course the first one is about upscaling and replication of pilots and demonstration projects. Every demonstration project, of course, and I think this is why all of us who've been working on pilots and demonstrations, they need to actually have a very strong inbuilt strategy for replication and upscaling. In the absence of that, maybe funds which are allocated for demonstration projects should be much better utilized in mainstreamed approaches for sort of working with communities and larger sort of numbers of people, rather than actually having more and more pilots which are never upscaled or replicated. So we need a very clear strategic orientation towards replication and upscaling, especially given the fact that we have such a major challenge and there is such an urgent need for action. The second piece is more policy related, which is about the state action plans on climate change. Now, of course, there have been lots of discussion about this. Some of you have been involved quite integrally into those discussions. I think the state action plans, if it remains at the state level, is actually not going to be a very useful document. So it has to be really downscaled. The first point of convergence for all kinds of schemes of the government of India, as well as the state government, is the district sort of collector's office. So at least the state action plans on climate change have to be downscaled to the level of a district. And some states, like I just was asked by the Kerala government to come and address some of the sort of work that they're doing. So they're already trying to downscale it to the district level, and some effort has been going on by other agencies as well. So it's very important to actually downscale the state action plans on climate change. The other part, of course, funds on climate change, either domestic or international, if they're completely focused on climate change, are not going to be enough. So we really need to look at approaches for mainstreaming adaptation. They're of course happening and currently being implemented in some parts, but of course we need to look at the big schemes where money is already being allocated in the rural development department, in the agriculture department, in the sort of infrastructure, rural infrastructure departments, irrigation infrastructure, is it already climate proofed? And if it is not, how do we climate proof it? How do we allocate a certain part of the resources which are allocated for development schemes and reorient it towards sort of avoiding climate risks? Is that happening? And what kind of knowledge, new knowledge, science, expertise do we require? Which brings me to my final point, which is about sort of capacities, human capacities, institutional capacities. So finances by themselves, I think I hear often enough from bureaucrats now that money is not a problem, that there is no dearth of financial resources, and this is quite new, but of course it's quite welcome as well. So how do you actually start thinking about strengthening capacities at human capacities as well as institutional capacities? Because it's important for all that I've just said. For upscaling, for replication, for mainstreaming, you need capacities. You need capacity development of individuals, of institutions, of networks at several levels. This is an area where the role of the state-run institutions as well as organizations such as MSSRF is very critical and very crucial. Without strong structures of building human capacities and institutional capacities, the challenges of alleviating the vulnerabilities of local communities would remain a distant and a difficult goal to achieve. The experience of State Action Plan on Climate Change implementation across the country confirms this kind of observation, and of course it has to be studied much in greater detail. States which have stronger institutional structures, stronger structures of governance, have been able to deliver a lot more out of their state action plans, and they've also been able to implement projects under the National Adaptation Fund much more effectively. Tamil Nadu is being a case in point. Of course, I believe a lot of the credit should go to institutions like MSSRF, which work, of course, within the state at the national level as well as the international level. We saw this fascinating example from Myanmar as well. But we need to build more such structures. We need more of MSSRF, but we need more of other institutions like MSSRF, which can actually play a very important role in a transformative process. And therefore, for the next 30 years or more, please continue to do more of what you're doing, this excellent job, and thank you so much for being here. Okay.
Thank you, sir, for those wonderful points. May I request now Dr. Pradanya Paitankar, World Food Prize, to come and World Food Program to offer her comments.
Honorable Professor Swaminathan, dignitaries on the dais, and ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege to actually stand here and talk in front of such an esteemed audience and the dignitaries. On behalf of WFP, I'd like to thank Professor Swaminathan for being WFP's philosopher, guide, and friend. And I hope you continue to do that, and the association with MSSRF as well as work continues over a period of time. Having said that, I'll just like to emphasize a few things that I would say have been said here, but at the same time need to be underscored and really looking at the target, which is actually the consultation on achieving sustainable development goals, which actually gives us a timeline and so the urgency. So I'd like to underscore that through a few slides. So this point has been made that the net capital availability of food grains, it has been stagnant over a period of time, though there are some small variations among different commodities. If we talk about the expenditure on food, which is also an indicator for understanding the vulnerability to food security, the expenditure, the proportion of expenditure is still very high among poor. And again, if we talk about what is really happening, the changing food baskets, we have been talking about reduction in calorie consumption, but at the same time, there is an increase in some of the healthy diets, but at the same time, the bad news is that the top line actually shows that there is a significant increase in expenditure of food, even among the poor section, on the junk food. And that is something which is actually alarming, which actually is leading to some more problems. We talk about the food safety nets when it comes to access, and even now the food security among the people across India is still not very good. It is still dependent on PDS, and the PDS actually helps in achieving the food security to a great extent. just actually, a few maps which are slightly darker than what was shown yesterday, because we have plotted it against the WHO recommended acceptable limits on stunting. So none of the states really is in acceptable range. May it be for wasting, which actually has increased over a period of time, and it is quite a bit of unexplained increase, which we have to really understand the reasons. The anemia, which is again, none of the state is really in the acceptable limits, and may it be among women or children. And this is the slide which I just wanted again to show you that if you see that there is a perfect complementarity between the thinness and the obesity. So what actually is, or rather used to be a kind of target for India, that we reduce the malnutrition, meaning that we reduce the undernutrition and we focus on certain groups. Now the thing is that exactly the complement of those groups are actually affected by the non-communicable diseases and the obesity, and hence now the canvas is the whole of the nation, the whole of the world, and so we actually cannot really have a single targeted strategy. Rather, it will be a kind of entire comprehensive approach, which actually will be much more required. Sorry. So if we talk about some of the indicators which are the simplest, we can say that are the simplest interventions, the exclusive breastfeeding. If we talk about the adequacy, and one of the panelists actually talked about the focus on 6 to 23 months, if we talk about minimum acceptable diet, it is actually criminally low. It is like at the overall India level, it is 9% of children are really getting minimum adequate diet. So the reason for highlighting this situation is actually to show that the business as usual approach is definitely not going to work. If we actually follow the same approach, we are not going to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal 2 specifically for stunting. And if we don't achieve it, if India misses the target, the world misses the global target. And so if in terms of achievement of, rather the targets of NNM, the National Nutrition Mission or the Poshan Abhiyan, they have been talking about doubling the rate of decline, which actually is a welcome step. And there are lots of measures which are being taken, but then there is quite a lot which needs to be done. Just a bit about WFP, what WFP has been doing. We are working in the country, and we specifically are working mainly on the access and the improved nutrition part. And in improved efficiency, we actually are working with the social safety nets, which are covering about 2/3 of Indian population, to improve their efficiency, because they are the biggest vehicle to really reach the population. And unless the vulnerable population is reached, we cannot really achieve the food security. And so the most important thing that WFP has been doing over last decade is improving targeting, the supply chains, the grievance redressal systems, and training of the implementers using both the modern techniques as well as the traditional techniques, and working on the communication strategy which actually reaches the vulnerable, and working on both demand and supply side. So for example, the vulnerability of the people is well known, but at times the corrupt system exists because of the lacunae in the overall system. So identified those kinds of financial viabilities of the people involved, and working on the overall value chain is something which has been WFP's effort. And there is quite a lot of the reforms that WFP has demonstrated are integrated into government policies. The second is improved nutrition. So again, we have been following up the pattern of the pilot and demonstration to scale up. And here specifically, I'd like to highlight that WFP has been emphasizing a lot on fortification, specifically for, again, in the social safety nets for THR and all. And what we actually believe is that there is no option. We have to actually work on all the strategies, which includes diversification, which includes fortification, and which includes supplementation all together, to really have a multiplier effect and the impact on the food security and hidden hunger at the grassroots level, without really going into the risk of the toxicities and all. So all that is quite clearly worked on, and I'm happy to actually announce that there is a scheme on the central sector scheme on rice fortification in 15 states has been announced by the Government of India. State of Kerala, based on our Wayanad project, has actually implemented the fortification of THR through self-help groups as an effective operational model, and it is being implemented across the state. And of course, I mean, the need for creating evidence for better planning and facilitating and cross-learning can never really die out. And we have been actually partnering with MSSRF for some of our work, and then there is quite a lot of plethora of work which actually goes into need-based studies and research, and which actually shows the way of doing the things rather than really just guiding as a kind of academic report. And so that kind of is also going towards promoting the South-South collaboration. We actually had facilitated quite a lot of cross visits, specifically with Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, and Bangladesh. And one more area which actually I'd like to highlight is where WFP is planning to work on is the disaster DRR, which is specifically on the resilient safety nets. So going from here, the last point I'd like to make is that there is an urgent need. The time is really running out, and if we don't really work together, I don't think there is a point of any further contemplation on how to go about it. There are lots of solutions which actually exist. The need is that we join hands and actually come together to implement those. For me, I think there is no choice that this or that. It is basically both. And so, I mean, with that, I think I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for highlighting the key points. Now it's time to listen to Ambassador Kenneth Quinn before we open up for the open forum.
Good morning. So, Dr. Swaminathan, my granddaughter Kylie shares a birthday with you, August 7th. She's 4 years old. She's in Bangkok with her mother. I talked to her, and she said she hopes that you got a lot of nice presents for your birthday. Well, I told her you did, and that. But I got a very nice present last night when I received the MS Swaminathan Award for Environmental Protection from the Rotary Club of Madras East. And so I'm not bragging, and there's a nice coverage in the Hindu today, but I want to say is that that present will last forever, because I will now have the MS Swaminathan name associated with me and in my bio for everyone to see. There could be no more significant honor. I'm so touched by that, to have your name associated with my life going forward. Now, I want to also note that yesterday there was an incredibly sobering development when the UN released its report about the impact that climate change can have on the world's food supply. To its everlasting credit, Secretary General Kofi Annan started the Millennium Development Goals. And on the Hunger Task Force, he turned to 2 World Food Prize laureates to co-chair, Pedro Sanchez from Cuba and Dr. MS Swaminathan from India, the first World Food Prize laureate. And this then has led now to the Sustainable Development Goals. And things look like they're going well, and you know, you're 94 now, you deserve to be able to rest a little. But with that report, now your role, your inspiration, your intellectual leadership is needed more than ever. So one thing that we can do, I'm so sorry Madhura had to leave, but I want to answer her call about getting the youth involved. And there's a present that we can all, working together, provide to Dr. Swaminathan, maybe for his 95th birthday. And that's in reaching out through the World Food Prize youth programs. Madhura Swaminathan joining our Council of Advisors. She's going to come to Des Moines in October. I'm going to put her together with the leaders of our youth outreach, and we can start planning for a World Food Prize Indian Youth Institute to reach high school students. So I was at SRM University yesterday, What an impressive place that is. And I was with the Rotary Club, and just imagine pulling them together, all of you, and the MSSRF Research Foundation, reaching into high schools all over this area and this part of India, bringing high school students to write the World Food Prize essay, and then pick the 5 top students and a teacher, and let's introduce them next August 7th as a birthday present to Dr. Swaminathan, and then put them on a plane and send them to Des Moines to join with the students from across America and from Africa and Europe and China at our Youth Institute, inspiring them to become involved in all of these issues, because everybody here, me, all of us, it's not to us, it's to young people, it's to that generation of 18-year-olds. It's their problem. They're going to have to deal with it. We have to inspire them. Now, I want to conclude. I was planning to conclude by singing a song. Norman Borlaug had a favorite song, the Iowa Corn Song, and but I thought, I might get the hook. But here's why I'm not going to sing the song. When I was 10 years old in school, we used to have music class, and we'd all sit singing. And I was in Catholic school. I had this tough nun, and she walked up next to me, and she listened to me singing. And she listened, and I'm there watching her and singing. And finally she said, "Kenneth, come with me." She took me to the back of the room, gave me some crayons, colors, and paper, and said, "You just be back here and draw pictures," and that. So you see, 67 years later, I'm still deeply scarred by that experience. But someday you'll hear the Iowa Corn Song, Norman Borlaug's favorite song, deeply meaningful. Again, thank you all for that. And Dr. Swaminathan, we need your leadership, your inspiration more than ever. God bless you.
Thank you, Ambassador. It's really interesting to hear you. With the chair's permission now, the session is open, and those who wish to raise some questions can put forth your questions to the panelists. You identify yourself and make your questions very briefly so that we can get maximum number of questions and answers.
Thomas Boller. What do you mean by bioirrigation?
I have to shorten my talk again.
No, there is a mic.
So I couldn't explain about bioirrigation, but the idea is that deep-rooting pigeon pea can take up water from deep soil layers and bring them to the shallow soil layers that are dry, and thereby irrigate the finger millet. And we have experimental data in the lab and greenhouse that confirm that this is possible. But as I was saying before, the competition effect between the two plants prevented up to now to implement this in the field. In experimental situations it worked, but so far not in the field.
Tamil Nadu, our farmers are doing another practice. They are planting one plant called agave around the coconut plant, and they keep the plant alive. Agave. It's a agave. Century plant.
Okay.
And also we plant coconut and banana together. This banana helps the coconut to have its water requirement. So this can also called as bioirrigation.
Exactly, yes.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Amit Mitra. I just work as an independent consultant, and for the last 3 days, it's been a really stimulating and inspiring 3 days. I had a quick set of questions for all the panelists as well as some of the members here, including Thomas Boller. That, the graph that Pragna presented on world hunger, increasingly, and Professor and I have been talking about it, this hunger, the food shortage is also being accompanied and is going to worsen with water shortages at all levels, at all levels. And somehow I felt that in the last 3 days it was there, but it didn't come up front. The whole water issue, its relationship with climate change, how the monsoonal patterns are shifting. And I think we need to pay urgent attention to this, because the crisis that's going to come up is, along with food shortage, along with this water shortage, and this is where Thomas Boller's bioirrigation comes in. There are many methods like that throughout the country. And this is also, so far, we have not considered really the linkages between water, nutrition, and health. And some of us using data from MSSRF have worked on a paper on this, linking water, nutrition, gender, and health. And I think that part really needs a lot of attention. Thanks.
My name is Boller. I am from Madras University. I am raising some issue in mainly 3 areas. One area is how agriculture can be used to solve the problem of unemployment among the youth in the village and also graduates in the cities. And another is how there are a lot of wastages of water, sewage water and garbages around the city. So there is a need to face this issue also. How agriculture can be benefited by recycling all the wastewater and all the solid things which is produced by the cities. Number 2. And another third issue is how the lands owned by government can be utilized to grow fruit trees to meet the nutritional requirement of the people in the long run. Finally, how the agriculture can be sustainable by using energy, because the energy is the important thing. So how can we make the agriculture sustainable in terms of utilizing energy, creating energy by using renewable energy, wind or solar or whatever may be. So I think we have to address these 4 kinds of issues, and I want some answers from the experts.
One quick remark on the revolution in rainfed lands. I take the advantage of the presence of Dr. Dalwai. The second green revolution or evergreen revolution that the foundation is inspiring for the future depends upon a social sustainable movement. We talked about 3 sustainability: ecological, economic, and social sustainability. This was there in the whole country 2000 years ago, but was eroded, including the soil erosion. And therefore, we have to bring back that. The great Tamil poet has said, "Varapuyera neer uyarum." If you have your field bunds little higher, you will store more water from the rainfall. Nowadays, you go to the rural areas, there are no bunding in the sizable manner to catch that rainfall. That is why the water scarcity, both in the rural areas for irrigation and in the urban areas for drinking water. So the outreach and advocacy recommendation of this international consultation should underscore, underline, and pinpoint, catch the rainfall where it falls. In the field, it should not go out. In the village, it should not go out. That was remarkably shown by Ralegan Siddhi experiment in Maharashtra. So that has to saturate everywhere. Thank you. This is a comment and not a question to you, sir, but you can add on. Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir. This is student Vishal from 3rd BSc Biotechnology from Hindustan College of Arts and Science, Coimbatore. So I have been a part of a Rotaract club, and I was a part of launching of SDGs in Coimbatore last month. So I have a question regarding the Sustainable Development Goals. So there are many problems in implementing these Sustainable Development Goals in India. First problem is that the funds which is being allocated by the Indian government doesn't reach to every part of the country in implementing these goals. So what can be done so that the funds gets equally separated and distributed to all the parts of the country for successfully implementing these SDGs, because lots of corruption is involved in this thing. And the second thing I wanted to know is about the language difficulties, because explaining everyone about this SDGs, there are lots of languages in our country. So how we can explain everyone about this SDGs without the language differences, and how we can implement by 2030 in India? Thank you, sir.
Well, this is only through public opinion, like what you have now said, public awareness and community control of corruption. Purely regulation and government alone will not be able to do. I think it's all everyone. I think it's part of the education program which needs to be from the beginning of their life. So I would say partly regulation and government control is important, but most important is the public cooperation in eliminating corruption.
I would just add one thing. So I come from a democracy. I'm here in a democracy. But I think as countries look at these situations that are described about water shortages, food shortages, unemployment, how you provide enough jobs, that there will be a strong tendency to consider authoritarian type government, and is the more efficient management system. And we'll see this played out across Africa in many places, and other parts of the world. And as those problems get more drastic, those kind of tendencies may find their way into even the most democratic of societies, that people will turn to some type of tight management controls. So these are a tendency that has to be watched and studied, and particularly from two countries that are such vibrant democracies, and that we would hope that countries would look to us and our model of how to deal with that. So whether corruption or what other problems there are have to be dealt with, or else our model is not going to be the one that people in other countries want to follow.
I think I will answer the set of questions that came from Professor of Madras University. I fully agree with you that given India's situation, where the population continues to grow and resources are under constraint, we would not be expecting to transfer a large number of people from agriculture to non-agriculture sector, that is manufacturing and services. Their capacity to absorb the high population may not be there. We therefore need to reorient agriculture such that it is able to generate employment and incomes. And the best example you saw was the bio rice park of Myanmar, where the purpose was to capture the value from every part of the plant. Now, what is happening is we think that the primary product, the grains or the fruits, are the only outcome of a biological system, whereas all other parts of the plant or an animal or a fish also have values. So we now need to bring science and technology to capture the value of every part. In that case, we'll be able to generate employment. Like today, a farmer in India is employed only for 185 days in a year, and the land intensity is only 145%. That means the two primary assets in agriculture, land and manpower, are not fully utilized. If we can apply technology, capital, training, skill, we will be able to generate employment. At the macro level, we should stop equating agriculture only with food and nutrition. We need to redefine the mandate of agriculture and say that can it also produce the intermediate goods for the manufacturing sector or for the energy sector that you were talking about. So we will be able to link agriculture in a renewable form with industry or service sector and thereby generate large number of employment and incomes associated. And as regards the soil and water conservation, it is a given. But I think the technologies are known. Replication and scaling it up has become a biggest problem. Like watershed management is being practiced in this country since 1980s. But today, yes, while we have successes, the successes have not been not proportionate to the investments we have made. When you took the example of Ralega Siddhi, for example, let's say Ralega Siddhi was a big example where people came together under a dynamic leadership of Anna Hazare. If you go to Ralega Siddhi today, you'll find that the cropping system has been totally changed. Because water was conserved and water came to be made available, people went in for high water duty crops, and once again they have begun to face drought. Whereas another village in the same state of Maharashtra, Hivre Bazar, which was inspired by Ralega Siddhi, practiced the same thing, replicated, but they learned that it is not only enough to do something new, but more important to maintain that. So Hivre Bazar has been focusing on maintaining the soil and water conservation practice, including crop alignment. So if you now compare two villages, you'll find Hivre Bazar is now better in agriculture productivity and sustainability compared to Ralega Siddhi. So the learning is not just do it once, but maintain it, which is a bigger challenge. Thank you.
The nutrition, the biofortification, and biodiversity loss. These are the three things linked, ending with a policy. Of course, the farmer secretary and now the head of the dryland system is there, Dr. Dalwai. When we say that loss of biodiversity is a cause for the nutrition erosion rather, and we have a naturally given lot of naturally biofortified foods. Our aim to popularize them at a level as Dr. Swaminathan Foundation doing as a kitchen garden, it is one of the best model, needs a replication, number one. Number two, if you look at the policy situation, we are distributing to maximum number of families rice without any substitutes or supplements. We know that rice is a double, triple, 4 times polished and is only put to the nutrition and the food aspect, but not the nutrition aspect. So the lesson learned are the success stories. If they are not going to be inculcated in the policist level, probably all our efforts will go like that. GTZ says they are doing a lot of work on hunger and also the malnutrition results. When there are certain solutions which have worked well at a grassroots level, we need to learn more lesson at the policy level. Even take from Government of Karnataka, where I was working for last about 30 years. Now I am working with the Biophysicians International. In spite of the success stories told, when it comes to the level of the policy making, all the success stories are sidelined. Again, the same issue continues. Rice, diversity with the policy. Thank you very much.
Sir, this is Reshma from 3rd BSc Biotech from Hindustan College of Arts and Science. My question is, there are many supporters, they hail genetic engineering is an essential factor for malnutrition and so on. So there are many opponents encountering that it is a corporate takeover of the traditional methods of agriculture and it is being replaced by the traditional methods of agriculture and the global food supply. So what is your views about that?
You see, technological progress is a continuum. From the days of Mendel, when the so-called laws of genetics were formulated, we find almost every decade or every 2 decades, new technologies have come. There was the colchicine, doubling of chromosomes, then mutation breeding, mutation, which is very important. And many other methods have come. One method of transferring genes for cross-sexual barriers has been the genetic modification. It's a very important opportunity here to enlarge your gene pool. But what is important is to look at that transfer case by case, not have a generalized set of rules. For example, in the case of cotton, the main problem could be the seed cake which is fed to the animals. In the case of brinjal, we eat the brinjal every time and so on. So a regulatory process by which careful examination can be done of benefits and costs will have to be done. Unfortunately, in our country, still we do not have a government approved or parliament approved regulatory system. That's very necessary. A parliamentary committee has recommended that we should adopt the Norwegian model and have a legislation which is based upon the Norwegian principles of. So all that you want, you can't stop technology progress. Now there are more very exciting progress is taking place in genetics. So you need to see that what could be a potential problem in terms of human nutrition will have to be studied carefully. And BT cotton, for example, since it's cotton and weaving, there has been not much of an objection. But in other cases of food crops, there are fears that the long-term implications have not been studied. There could be more cancer. In fact, newspapers give information on cancer patients in the Punjab and so on, where even before GM foods came, excessive use of fertilizer, excessive use of pesticide, many of these problems are there. So once you integrate in your production system sufficient safeguards to ensure that no negative consequences there or are benefits. So I would say those who are interested, you can't stop progress in science and technology. That will go on. It has been going on, it will go on. So long as our brains work, there will be more new technologies coming. But whether the technology is useful or not, you saw the Rice Biopark, for example. The two problems of our country and many countries is one of the food safety problems are there. Then secondly, how to get more income from farmers. Our government here in India has been saying we must double the income of farmers. How do you get more jobs for the young people? The other challenge is how to attract and retain youth in farming. They don't want to come. But all that can be overcome by the Rice Biopark provides you with additional income from the straw, the grain, the various parts of the plant value addition. And at the same time, it provides jobs for educated young people. They can put up the Rice Biopark. We are trying to put up one similar one for pulses, and there again, the idea is to train large number of young people who can initiate such activities with some support from credit and so on. So I would say that as far as GM is concerned, going back, because that was the question, genetic modification, we must ensure that we do not deny ourselves the benefits of the technology. At the same time, we are careful that the consumer is not really adversely affected. But the idea of is to increase the yield and so on of the crop. And so benefits and risks will have to be analyzed carefully by an impartial body, by a body which commands public confidence. Public confidence is important before we can have acceptance, widespread acceptance.
Everybody will agree that this is a very, this session was more lively and we had a lot of questions. With this, now we'll close the open forum, and may I request Dr. Anil Kumar to offer his.
Respected Professor and the dignitaries on the dais and off the dais. We had a very rich session. Dr. Bhavani brought the discussion points from the previous days as well. So the foundation, when we planned for this 30-year anniversary, we had several rounds of discussion, where we have to focus. So this is where, we finally picked the top 3 priority actions. One is the climate change, adaptation and mitigation. How best we can use the agriculture sector to achieve because agriculture sector is very crucial sector for the country, especially in view of the adaptation to climate change as well as the mitigation to climate change. So as you could see in the morning, we had a big list of recommendations. We will be prioritizing again the major and the urgent discussion points from there. And in case of food and nutrition system, the SDG number 2, that is the major goal which we are trying to take the associated targets and the indicators, the well set indicators are there. In case of biodiversity, the biodiversity mainstreaming in the agricultural sector. When we say the agricultural sector, including the animal husbandry, not only the crop husbandry, the agroforestry, the fisheries, and the aquaculture, the entire system. So the entire system of smallholder agricultural system. So here we coined our the way forward. This particular session, several points for the way forward. The bio-village paradigm, which there was a reference about the bio-village paradigm, we also feel that is the pathway to achieve the sustainable development goals. So when the horizon 2030, the next 10 years, in foundation, we have listed out some 100 villages where we are working. So whether we can make these 100 villages by 2030 or by 2025 into bio-villages, where the endogenous development, where the community themselves are coming up. Now we have seen the rice biopark where every part of the rice plant is used. But if you look at every resource of village, every resource of village could be used properly. As we here there was a reference, there is no sustainability in such kind of development. But here only the village level institution building. See, MSSRF, our capacity, I believe, the grassroots institution building. If you look at the examples which we have promoted, large number of women and men are formed into women self-help groups, farmer producer organizations, farm clubs, and so on. So these examples, we strongly feel these examples are success stories in our sites, but we want to replicate and we want to show this in the total village effect. So we have selected these 100 villages where we are working from 3 vulnerable agroecological zones. The most vulnerable agroecological zones, as we have discussed, the coastal zone. India has got long coast. And our the semi-arid region, if you look at the aridity is actually in a very faster way it is coming. So how do we address the arid region issues? And finally the mountain region. So these 3 principal agroecological zones and 100 bio-villages, this is where our dreams comes in, our vision comes in. So I thank you very much for the kind of inputs which we have got it here, and our job is to prioritize. As Professor said, if you have clarity on the goals, then if you have clarity on your capacity, resources are there. You need to have the priority, you need to believe in yourself, and then fix the jigsaw. Then we will be able to go forward. So this is what foundation from 30 years to 2030. So from 30 years of experience, how we are taking this learning to reach the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. So with these few words, I want to take this opportunity. There is a formal vote of thanks, but I want to take this opportunity to thank you, all of you, because we had a very fine minds here. So many wonderful ideas came in. So you have given us so much of ideas. I would like to take this opportunity to thank each one of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Anil. Now it is time to listen to Professor for his closing address.
Friends on the podium and in the audience here, I want to thank those who patiently last 2.5, 3 days. You all stayed here. Many times after the first session, people disappear. And I see here, that only shows a tribute to the speakers also. You are sufficiently attracted by the speakers who are making a useful point. So first of all, I wish to thank all those who are present here because you are all going to be messengers of a new India. Our own idea is the next 20 years of MSSRF, 30 years have gone. One of the major areas of work should be hunger-free India. Hunger-free in terms of calorie deficiency, hunger-free in terms of micronutrient problems, what's called a hidden hunger, protein hunger, all forms of hunger. How do we have a hunger-free India? Because there is an opportunity today in India to make it completely hunger-free, and this will be appropriate tribute to Mahatma Gandhi, whose 150th birthday is occurring on October 2. If you want to do, because Gandhiji said before he died that to God, to the hungry, God is bread. To those who are hungry, God is bread. And therefore, we should ensure that we make a contribution. I'm not talking about this small institution alone, but generally those who are working in the field of food science, agriculture science, we can make a tremendous contribution today. Biofortification was mentioned. Biofortification marries nutrition and agriculture. Mainstream in agricultural methods, the nutritional dimension, and today it is possible to get many plants which provide you the missing nutrients in the diet, particularly vitamin A, vitamin B12, vitamin iron, iodine, all of them. In fact, one of the recent prizes of the World Food Prize was given to biofortification. Biofortification was recognized. So somebody who mentioned it, biofortification, I only want to encourage you to go ahead, and there are enough opportunities. We are fortunate to have had this meeting a wide spectrum of knowledge. Here is my good friend Bruce Alberts. He has shown you what he has done, not only in the academy. He was at National Academy of Sciences when he was president, but also as a chief editor of the Science magazine, one of the finest magazines. He has always promoted causes of the developing countries, science in developing countries, and science for young people. In fact, inspired by him, we have a program here called Every Child a Scientist. Next building here is the Every Child Scientist. The idea is not that they will become scientists in the sense of professional science, but modern science. A lot of problems we have, health problems, can be solved if we are able to understand why it has gone. Mention was made about community mobilization, apart from education and community mobilization. In fact, my father, whose name is at auditorium, Shambhajivan Auditorium, he got the filarial mosquito eradicated totally within 1 year in the town of Kumbakonam in Tanjavur district, only by social mobilization and education. At that time there was no DDT, and therefore crude oil emulsion used to be sprayed on the... But I remember as a student, I was also taken around by the teacher, and under the inspiration of my father, he asked all the teachers to take the children in the road where they are living, which is the spot where the mosquito is breeding. First is understanding it, and then do you want this particular spot to be closed? If you still want it for some purpose, some water or some, then you spray crude oil emulsion once a week and so on. So within 1 year, a place which was well, almost every third person used to suffer from filariasis, elephantiasis, but it was eradicated. So we should not underestimate the power of both education and social mobilization, community mobilization. In fact, many of the pests in the field, agriculture pests, instead of applying too much pesticide, if the area people cooperate, you can have a variety which is resistant and so on. So one of the main purposes of this institution has been to marry science and society through methods by which science is applied to important social causes. I would say that we have in Dr. Bruce Alberts a great advocate of education, and education is fundamental. Education is fundamental. We had Ambedkar, his day recently, and his main message was everybody should have access to education, relevant education. Dr. Kenneth Quinn, I want to congratulate you on your being recognized by the Rotary Club. an enormous amount of work he has done. Dr. Norman Borlaug, who was mainly instrumental in getting the World Food Prize established as the same status as the Nobel Peace Prize. His idea was that we should have a Nobel Prize in agriculture. They said the team who are in charge of the Nobel Prizes, they said it is not in Nobel's will, and therefore you can't create a new prize. Even the economics prize which is called Nobel Prize in Economics, but it's not in the original will of Nobel. It was created by the Bank of Scotland, by the bank which gave money for that. No, the idea was not the prizes are important, but important to the subject. The idea of Borlaug was not that one individual will get a World Food Prize. The problem can be solved. It cannot be solved. What is important is the society recognizes those who are doing work which transcends their own particular area, but helps the community as a whole. The problem of employment, as I said, is going to be an important one in our country in particularly, and agriculture can promote job-led growth. Most of the industries promote jobless growth. How do you promote job-led growth? Through agriculture. And what we saw, Dr. Paliar is here, who helped in setting up the biopark in Naypyidaw in Myanmar, shows how from agriculture, instead of burning the straw can be an important source of food. The straw, rice straw-based mushrooms and so on. So many products can be done. In fact, when I first established the biopark, rice biopark at the International Rice Research Institute in the Philippines, Mrs. Cory Aquino was the president of the Philippines. She visited and she was fascinated. She told a Filipino lady who was converting rice straw into paper that I want to print all my Christmas cards with your paper, the rice straw paper. That I am showing only because unless there is some encouragement to them and there's a market, it must be a market-driven product. If it is not market-driven, then it's so there are great opportunities today. Mention was made about the rice biopark in Myanmar. Pulses Biopark is going to be established with the help of NABARD. Then we also trained a large number of Afghan scholars in genetic conservation, because Afghanistan is rich in genetic material, but they are all disappearing. So how do you conserve? So these one way of sharing our thoughts and information is to have particularly neighboring countries, SAARC countries and so on. And the Ministry of External Affairs of Government of India is very supportive of the possibility of inter-institutional collaboration. What was mentioned by our friend from World Food Program, large. In fact, World Food Program, and we prepared a number of atlases, food insecurity atlas of rural India, food insecurity atlas of urban India. They are available. They have to be updated once in 10 years at least in order to make them relevant. So, ladies and gentlemen, the area which we have discussed in the last 2.5 days is exceedingly important. Of course, I am not going into the climate change. In fact, one of the first projects started by the foundation was sea level rise. How do you combat sea level rise? Otherwise, you will have a lot of climate refugees. When I go to Kerala, for example, along the coast, people are living right near the sea. Mumbai is a good example, right near the sea. And once the sea level goes up, you will have a problem. And this is why we call it anticipated research. We have a large number of varieties of rice which are tolerant to salt water, sea water. So we have a program, seawater farming for coastal area prosperity. So, the point I want to make is, if you identify the problem, what the problem is, then you can find a solution to it. You can work on it, you can apply your mind, this is a problem, how to solve it, and so on. So the idea of this kind of interchange here is only to share our ideas, and that is not cannot be done in 2.5 days. But our friends, both Bruce Alberts and Kenneth Quinn, they have come from a long distance and shared their views. And I want to once again thank you for what you did to popularize Indian work in science. When you were the chief editor of Science magazine, he got several times the work done in India properly projected in the magazine, because it's also important for like anybody else, for scientists to feel that whatever they are doing is somewhat meaningful to other scientists, meaningful to society, and so on. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming, and particularly once again I congratulate Ken, and also thank you for what you have done. And Myanmar is such an example. Today, Myanmar Biopark, everywhere people ask me, the rice biopark in Myanmar, can you tell us how to establish one? It has aroused interest. Kuttanad, for example, Kerala has a lot of problem of jobs and income. The whole of Kuttanad area, the Wayanad in Kerala, there could be rice bioparks. Today the straw is getting wet and getting soaked with aflatoxins, mycotoxins, and so on. They can all be avoided. So if there are people here who will spread the message that this can be done, there are ways by which we can increase the income of farmers, there are ways by which we can increase the quality of produce. And I personally, I will not live to see this, but I want to see that this institute continues to make a major contribution for achieving the goal of hunger-free India, which is one of our main goals for the Sustainable Development Decade. The UN Millennium Development Decade also had the same, poverty and hunger should be reduced. But now Sustainable Development Decade emphasizes the eradication of hunger, but on the basis of sustainability, long-term sustainability, not one day of eradicating hunger, but it has to be sustained one. And that's the goal of the institution, and similar institutions should get together and join together with the government. The government is always very supportive in all these matters. And the other day the Chief Minister and the Deputy Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu had come here. They also emphasized that Tamil Nadu has been a leader in overcoming hunger. One of the first states in India which introduced universal noon meal program for all the schools, one meal, a good meal a day, which provides all the nutrients and so on. But I think we can spread this message everywhere, and where there's a will, there's a way. And the idea of this institution is to both generate the will and adopt the will ourselves also, that we should make a contribution to a hunger-free India, which is that will be the best tribute to Mahatma Gandhi's 150th anniversary. Because again and again you have repeated it. The Roman philosopher Seneca said it long ago: a hungry person listens to neither reason nor religion. He wants food today. He wants food today, not tomorrow. The same Mahatma Gandhi said when he said, to those who are hungry, God is bread, and this God of bread should be available in the home, and that should be our motto. But that has a lot of implications in terms of science, in terms of public policy, in terms of community awareness, in terms of people's cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your crucial comments and the closing remarks. I also thank all the panelists for their wonderful comments and relating it to the Sustainable Development Goals and strengthening the science for climate resilience. Now we will be doing a very pleasant duty. My colleagues are here. They are going to distribute the mementos to the panelists, and this memento carries all the grains and various plants that were all grown by our self-help group members in different parts of the country, and Dr. Oliver and his team will deliver, give it to the panelists.
millets and other.
Thank you, Oliver. Now I request Dr. Oliver King to formally give the vote of thanks.
I hope you all agree that 2.5 days deliberations were very fruitful, and we had a wonderful sharing and learning experience. This is my humble duty on behalf of the organizing committee of the 30th anniversary of the foundation and international consultation on achieving sustainable development goals and strengthening science of climate resilience. First of all, let me thank the Honorable Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu and Honorable Deputy Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu for graciously be present here and deliver the inaugural address and special address. Our thanks goes to the key delegates here, Dr. Ambassador Kenneth Quinn, Dr. Eric, Dr. Saib, Dr. Kundavi Kadiresan, and Dr. Bruce Alberts. This conference, the last 3 days, we had 5 sessions. Over 40 panelists across the country and nationally and internationally they have participated. More than 300 delegates they have attended and shared and learned there from this experience, wonderful experience. I profusely thank Professor Swaminathan, our beloved Guru, for his wisdom and guidance and constant encouragement throughout all these 30 years of journey. Our thanks goes to our Chairperson, Dr. Madhura Swaminathan, and Board of Trustees for their critical inputs and advice and their guidance all along the way. Our thanks to Dr. Anil Kumar for his guidance while the preparation of this last 2.5 months, I would say, for his constant guidance and support. And also our thanks goes to the Council of Directors for their support. Our thanks goes to all the chair and co-chair and panelists of the session, and especially our thanks goes to the farmer producer organizations, custodian farmers who had gathered and assembled from different destinations, from agrobiodiversity hotspots, primarily from the tribal region and coastal region and Rainfed regions in the country. This conference was supported by a number of funding agencies. I need to name it: Qualcomm Wireless Reach, World Food Program, Jamalal Bajaj Foundation, Venkateswara Hatcheries, RKVY, Department of Agriculture, Cooperation and Farmers Welfare, Protection of Plant Variety and Farmers' Rights Act, National Biodiversity Authority, NABARD, Sandalwood Research, Coromandel Groups, INELI and ICFA. We thank each and every one of you for their financial support for the conduct of this conference. And we had a number of committees internally: the convener and staff, conference secretary committee, technical program committee, academic documentation committee, reception committee. 3 exhibitions were important and inaugurated by delegates here and those committee members: logistics, accommodation, food and refreshment, transportation committee, floor management committee, media and website management committee, finance, administration and all support staff. And I thank each and every one of you gathered here on the dais and also off the dais. And I request all of you to rise for national anthem.
Jaya Gata